50 ways to lose your money. We defer to the great Paul Simon song that naturally was some kind of conversation about degenerate gambling because you haven't been gambling or been a sports fan long enough if you haven't at some point in your life experienced that feeling of desperation. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, people, and it was especially in evidence last night. Now, we talked about and had a very tepid endorsement for the Denver Broncos, laying 6 points at home last night against the Cleveland Browns. And what was the key factor, the deciding factor in determining that the 6 points was what was not prohibitive enough for you to go ahead and get off of the favorite in this ball game? Was the Jameis Winston factor. And if you had known going into the game that Jameis Winston was going to throw for 497 yards, 4 touchdowns in the ball game, make any number of brilliant plays to Jerry Jeudy, who had 9 catches for over 200 yards in the contest and a touchdown as well, you would have thought, geez, that's 6 points. I must have gotten annihilated. But at the end of the ball game, and I've been in this situation enough times where the only thing that can save you, it's kind of like sweating out those hockey over-unders if you've gotten to this level of depravity when it comes to gambling. Hey, what are you talking about? I'm making a lot of money doing that, Defoe. If that's your game, good. If you're good at it, go ahead and pursue it. That's for sure. But they pulled the goalie. You've got an over-under of 7.5. It's 4-3 in favor of the home team. The other team yanks the goalie with 2 minutes to go in the game. And every time they get possession of the puck, you're just absolutely on a bed of razor blades, thinking, "Don't go in the net! Don't go in the net! Don't ruin me here." And maybe you hang on in desperation and win. Last night it was, and I've been in sports books and been screaming this in the final minutes of a game: pick six, pick six. And sure enough, Jameis throws a pick six, the one thing that can beat you. After Sean Payton had opted to go for a field goal, which I thought was a smart move here. This wasn't Mario Cristobal in that Syracuse game against the University of Miami that we talked about yesterday. You have to take the lead at that stage of the ball game, even if you're thinking that it's a cinch that we're going to make this 4th and inches and have a chance to put the Cleveland Browns in their coffin there with a late touchdown. Instead, they get the field goal, and they still leave the Browns with a chance to get back into the ball game. And it appears they're going to do just that. And sure enough, they end up throwing the pick six, Jameis Winston. The guy's on the ground, too. He goes untouched. And if you had the Browns last night, we certainly have great empathy for you. We will be at your funeral, your financial funeral, because that was about as tough a beat as you could get. 2 pick sixes in the game, 14 points, and 3 interceptions overall. They even have a chance to help you cover the spread after the fact. And another interception that does you in. That's a Jameis Winston factor. So if you played against it last night, unfortunately, you have our sympathy and little else because you certainly don't have any capital. If you were betting the games, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for all things when it comes to betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen as well. And with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, boxing's going on. It's going big. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV, all caps, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Very generous stuff going on there. BetOnline, the game starts here. And the game on. Look how handsome this guy is. My goodness, Mike Jones. Joining us on a Tuesday, Scotty M, a little under the weather here. We have one of those beautiful days on tap here. We all hail from South Florida. And while the rest of the country is considering eating the flesh of dead animals that they breed roadkill, and especially in Alabama, where they're hoping to get into the playoff, we're enjoying these kind of modest temperatures that we only get on occasion. And Mike, you look like you're taking it all in. Mike Jones, who's under the weather today, believe it or not, on a day like this. How are you, my friend?
Good. Here comes the backup QB to the rescue here. Hopefully I do the right thing here. So, I had Cleveland last night.
You did? Okay.
Yep. So let's go back. First game in NFL history where a player throws for 450 and throws 2 pick sixes. So we haven't seen that ever.
Yes.
And I found that to be an interesting stat waking up in the morning. But if you're looking around the league, I think Jameis has put together 2 of the more fun games we've seen in a couple of weeks. You know, the game in the snow and they gets a big win in Cleveland last week. And then, you're watching him last night saying, can this guy move around the league in the next year and find a job the way the quarterbacks played, man? And then you see him throw the pick six. As soon as I text that to somebody, then he throws a pick six, and I'm sitting there going, well, I better eat those words. So it was constant last night, but a very interesting game. I think you could find value betting the second half and realizing this game was probably going over only 21 and a half second half. So you play around with the games like this. The live betting is so much fun now. And, sure enough, I took Cleveland live 8 and got beat by the point. That's what I bet it. I didn't bet it at the beginning. I was watching it going, that's it. And, and one other interesting stat I want to share with the gambling audience. And this was, I studied this for 2 years when I was out West and back here, and I watch it. It's so amazing. When team gets a defensive touchdown, one of the more fascinating things is two things happen. One, you have this huge celebration, and especially when it's distance. So you got 11 guys that run 100 yards on a dead sprint down the field to celebrate with the crowd if it's home, anywhere it is. You yell at the opposing crowd. They get on the bench. They're lining up. The extra point's probably kicked before they even stop saying hello. Then next thing you know, the kickoff comes and they're right back out on the field. So there was a 65% where the offense would end up going down and scoring or getting any kind of points on the next drive. Their anger mixed with now all that energy used in the celebration and coming back on all that emotion. And I found that games that took these pick sixes or defensive scores were immediately turning over. And it was just a fascinating thing. And my buddies and I were watching it going, now watch this. Here it happened in this game. 60% chance that they would get down and score. I just found that to be a fascinating stat. So when it was 21-10, I bet the +8 because I said, you know what? Here's where I think this can happen. And sure enough, next play hits Judy on a 70-yard touchdown. And now we're back to a 4. Now, if you look, the game's 5 or 3 in just one play. That's what makes live betting fun. And with that stat, I was digging into it. It's just a little bit of something out there for the better to look for come the playoff time is that these big plays sometimes that look great and, we're done. Now, the offense does bounce back a little bit,
That was one of those breaking points. It could have easily been a huge turning point in the ball game, as it was. But as you said, Jameis, then following that statistic that you pulled out of the sky here, which is brilliant, they march right down the field and are back in the ball game, and you're saying to yourself, "Well, I'm in there with half a chance." But as we started the show by singing 50 Ways to Lose Your Money with Jameis Winston, unfortunately, and I've become more of a Jameis fan. You wish he could find a way to get rid of this fault. Some quarterback whisperer get in his ear and say, listen, Jameis, you can't keep throwing the ball to any open man. You have to, unless he's Vinny Testaverde and he's colorblind, he has an amazing penchant for throwing the ball to the other team. But it's 50 ways to get fucked when you're dealing with Jameis Winston, unfortunately. And as spectacular as you can look at times, this has been characteristic of his entire career, including at times when he was in college. It's just that at that point, you didn't have the parity level of the NFL when FSU was trouncing some of the lesser lights on their schedule. Yeah. And so he would put these numbers up, and even though he'd throw a pick or two, they were able to overcome it. So interesting last night. But have you been there? Many times I've been. Somebody's asking me how the wagers are going, and you're texting back, I need a pick six. It's the only thing that can save me. And somehow you managed to carve one out, and still you had to sweat out the end result of that ball game. So that was pretty remarkable last night. All right, that wraps up the week in the National Football League, but it comes right back on Thursday night. Kind of interesting, as we did see. Now, I think you might have been in agreement with me. This might have been the one game you lost last week. Did you have the Miami Dolphins in that game against the Green Bay?
I did. Yeah. The fascinating part about that, which was scary, is I was talking to my guys out west or professionals at this, and everybody was on Miami. There was a lot of play. The Tua factor going up there in the cold really didn't affect the betting number. And I think that's why you saw 3.5, 3, and it hunkered down there. And then you start seeing what really is going on. That it's the running game of Green Bay and the big plays and stuff like that. Just you could see the factors that game went on that Green Bay was taking control of that game. A little out physical. It's tough that cold weather. I mean, I grew up in it. We grew up in it. Being in the football, and you got to have a mindset that really digs into it. And again, had the pleasure, not for a game, but did a Lambeau tour, and there's nothing in that town but the Packers, and it is such an interesting place to go look at. And I was like, the Miami fans going up there here, seeing all the videos of the plane ride and all that stuff for the fan base. And then you get up there and it's 20 degrees. And you start checking like, whoa, it's a different element. So I just thought, it was one of the games where I kind of looked at it midway through the second quarter and said, well, there's money wasted.
Yeah, I mean, Miami's tossing the ball like they're throwing a frisbee on the beach during practice all week, leading
Mhm.
up to the ball game, and then all of a sudden, and you know how this is. You're catching the ball. It's like a guy just threw a block of ice at you.
Right.
You don't even want to catch the ball when you first get out there,
Mhm.
unless you're somewhat accustomed to it. But I convinced myself, and this is why gamblers and
Mhm.
people that are in marriages, for the second and third time, need therapy constantly because I convinced myself that I wasn't going to believe what I had seen over and over again.
Mhm.
The so-called definition, Mike Jones, of insanity is to just keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. And no matter how many times we've seen the Dolphins just perish under these circumstances, discombobulate completely, generate nothing, even when they've had high wire act offensive lineups, even with Danny Boy in there, Dan Marino, and
Right.
get into cold weather and then just literally evaporate as if they were in blazing heat. And it happened again. I mean, the first half was dreadful against Green Bay, and I had convinced myself, and I guess you had too, that well, you know what, these trends mean nothing. All the
Right.
people are screaming like, well, in
Gotta
40
gotta do
temperatures are below, the team has never won a ball game going all the way back to when Joe Auer returned the opening kickoff in 1966 for their first ever play and score. But I ignored all of that, being
Yeah.
the brilliant handicapper that I am, and said, oh, no, I think they're on a roll right now. They're playing
Mhm.
well enough to beat Green Bay or at least be within a field goal.
Yeah.
And that was hardly the case. They had one shot at it. You always seem to have one shot at redemption. And then, much like with the Jameis Winston pick six,
You
huge
get one.
turning point in the game when they failed to score from their own 1
Mhm.
yard line. What was that, first and goal? And
Yeah.
they failed to score. And they had a chance to get within the so called one score margin there, get within 8 points if they had gotten the touchdown there. And instead, they end up losing the ball on the 5 yard line on downs.
Yeah.
And that was it. Green Bay takes it down the field, and the ball game was over. So we were dead wrong about that. And
Mhm.
I'll do it again, though, Mike. I'm sure you will
We
too.
will we'll
Everything
do
points in one direction, and you go ahead and say, "No, I'm
right.
going to leave all that off. They're going to find a
We will do it again. I'll give you two other ones. I got to win the way it happened, and a
yeah,
loss the way that happened. Let's go to Seattle and the Jets. 7 shots on the 1 yard line, can't get in. Somehow they figure a way. Line changes. I get Seattle plus 1.5 Sunday instead of laying 2.5 on Thursday with you. They end up covering. How? I don't know. Aaron Rodgers throws a freaky interception to Leonard Williams. First time in defensive history that a defensive lineman went 92 yards with a pick six, right? And it changed the complexion of that game. At that point, I think it was 21-7, and Seattle had just fumbled the kickoff. So you think this is over. And Rodgers brings it up in the post conference and says, if I hit that pass prior to Wilson before the play before the interception, it's 28-7, and we're the game's probably over. Then vice versa, go to Kirk Cousins. Cousins throws a terrible interception in the end zone, and I'm sitting there yelling at the TV, going, "Why at 4th and 2 do you not go for 3 points there to make it a 1 point game and need a field goal to win?" And then the analytics gets in of all the things that we talk about. And the Harvard guy who never played football comes into the game, the betting angles, and changes the entire way you're looking at football now. They went for it, 4th and 2, make it. Instead of taking a three, he throws the interception on third down, a horrific interception that now they're talking on ESPN like they should bench him and put in another young quarterback. So these things happen in gambling that are so often. And, I always hung out with some of the guys who lose and said, yeah, but if that happened, I would have won. If this happened, I would have won. If I didn't hit the golf ball out of bounds, I would have made a birdie. It's like all that stuff that when you listen to these conversations are just, just tough. But those were the couple of things I went through with having Atlanta and having Seattle this weekend. So to your point of last night, it's so constant in this game we call gambling.
I read something for all the people that obviously should be seeking therapy that come up with all of these excuses after the fact that, and this has stuck with me that you can never determine what a subsequent series of events would have gone like based on something that transpired already. In other words, if so and so doesn't do this, then I go ahead and I win the ball game. You have no idea if that would have been the case.
That's right.
Now,
That's right.
every now and then it happens on a final play or
Yeah.
somewhere along the lines where it's absolutely a determining factor. But in general, it's impossible to excuse away things that happen by saying, "Well, you know what? If so and so hadn't hit into a double
Yeah.
play, then you have no idea what would have
Mhm.
transpired if that hadn't taken place." So there's no way to determine what the outcome would have been or might have been and whether or not you would have lost your money in some kind of
Yeah.
justifiable fashion. So, pretty wild. I was talking earlier this morning on another show, speculation. A guy wrote kind of an interesting little dissertation here about the college football playoff and how and this is something I think that comes out of your schematics when it comes to gambling, and that is where is there a wager you can make where the house has no clear cut advantage, where it's not an automatic. I mean, mathematically, it's worked into the equation. If you're shooting craps, the house
Mhm.
has its advantage, however small it may be if you're playing the game precisely by the methods that would be
Right.
prescribed. And we know people don't do that because it's like, hey, press my heart eight. What are you talking about? Pair of fours there, shooter. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, people are playing the game in a fashion that is not conducive. You may win big on a certain play, but you're shooting for the moon and you're playing right into the house's lap in
Mhm.
terms of increasing their house advantage. But the one place they have no advantage, and this was pointed out by a guy named Doug Kazarian, who I think used to be with ESPN. He wrote a very eloquent and well thought out piece here, which will probably bury the public. But and he says they have no advantage because nobody knows what the thinking of the college football playoff committee would be. Now maybe you have. This is where it would help to have like Clarence Thomas on the committee,
Yeah.
where he would be selling this information off for favorable treatment, safaris, whatever the hell he wants to go on,
Right.
lush, lavish vacations and
Mhm.
homes and this sort of thing. But the House has no idea what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to decide.
Mhm.
In this case, the people that are booking the bets, no more insight into it than you or I might have. I mean, where
Right.
it's speculation. And unless you did have privy to inside information, it's anybody's guess, including the House that are booking these bets. So he makes a case to go ahead and take an 8-1 price tag on the University of Miami to make it into the college football playoff. Miami
Hmm.
would just blew whatever chance you thought they might have by losing that game on the road to Syracuse. A horrible defensive team. Resume doesn't include any real big names that they were able to tag during the
Mhm.
course of the season. They lost to Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech made a decent account of themselves, but
Mhm.
and almost beat Georgia by all rights. There's another one. Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Sure. Unbelievable.
Chicago Sun-Times writer Dave Feldman had a book out by that title, and it was all about his adventures at the racetrack. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But they ended up at 10-2
Mhm.
outside the ACC playoff championship game, so no shot to win that. You would think the two teams that were in the game would be ahead of them, but if Clemson loses this game to SMU is going to be in the playoff for sure, and I think Clemson gets bypassed. Then would it be worth taking a shot with the University of Miami at 8-1 just to make it into the field? Would you think that would be a likelihood that somehow you'll see the ACC get what? Would that mean they get three teams into the
Um,
postseason?
it, I think it's either SMU. A Clemson win makes it either SMU or Miami, or possibly none. Just Clemson, and SMU win will sure knock. I mean, SMU win. Clemson's got no shot, and then it looks like, do they take two ACC teams? Here's where I look at this and being very, very interesting. So let's go back to the young lady who does ESPN and does a very good job, Heather Dinich, who has
Yes.
been picking it right the whole time. Last week she was dead on right. All 12
Did
teams.
she get married to somebody on the committee? Because wow, she's been
Yeah, I mean, she was right. But here's what she said
Dino
Saturday.
Cook's rolling over in his grave looking at this
Yeah,
woman.
Saturday night, Sunday morning. I was talking to a very dialed in Canes fan who was so upset after that loss. No way, they shouldn't be in. They're not a chance. She had him in at 11. So
Eight
think
to one, my
on
friend.
that particular, just her saying doing that, I would bet the 8-1. Just saying, maybe she's got something. She knows that they're looking at a two-loss team. They don't want this SEC and Big Ten dominated leagues. Because I'll give you this one, and I think we should take a look at this because I'm a proponent as an SEC guy. My family in South Carolina, being around here, and paid for it diligently out in Vegas. They went after me all the time being an SEC supporter in Vegas when I was there. But and this is a Big Ten team. Penn State, explain me this. They play West Virginia, not even in a bowl game. Beat them. They play Kent State and almost lose. We're losing to Bowling Green at home. Give me their big signature win in the Big Ten, 28-27 to Minnesota. They beat Illinois by 14 earlier on. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good win. I think Illinois went into that game undefeated. Lost to Ohio State. Should they get blown out by Oregon? Do they even belong in? Now you give Miami a shot. I think a two-loss Miami team would beat a Penn State team or at least be in the game. So maybe the Penn State destruction helps Miami and says maybe people say, we can't have a two-loss Miami team out. So I think the way she put it, leaving Miami in, because that was the question they had. I asked a couple people from a South Carolina standpoint where they stand in this.
Yes,
They've won 6 in a row. They're
that's
playing well. I listened to a radio show with Tom Luganville yesterday tell us that he feels that Sellers was out during the LSU loss. They were up 14. He got hurt. That if you take the Jordan Travis injury of last year and make Florida State out, do you have to use that loss? He had South Carolina ranked 10th in the country that they should get in. So there's going to be a lot of this stuff going around. But 8-1 on Miami. When you said that, I think my eyes lifted a little bit. That's a pretty fair price, and I would take that chance.
seems like it. I mean, look, it's the holiday period of time here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have 2 sticks to spread around for gifts, and maybe even buying some grub for somebody along the way, buying a few drinks for one of your buddies. All of a sudden, you take the 8-1. Now, before we even get to Christmas, you're going to know this answer pretty soon.
That's right.
You're going to know it next week. A week from today, as all of these conference championships will be decided. Now you've got 1,600.
Right.
You're inviting your family and friends to your favorite restaurant, and you're picking up the entire tab as if you were catering the Last Supper. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it could change your whole holiday. This recommendation of ours, which we're both on the same side, and it kind of scares me a little bit, Mike Jones. But this guy makes a pretty good case.
Yeah, and there's
the price is, I guess, worth a shot. No,
the price is absolutely worth a shot in something like this, because if they get in, are they getting 8-1? You might be getting 12-1 or 13-1 off.
300-1 to win it all.
301 in it all. Well, there you go.
8-1 to win, get into the postseason, and 300-1 to win it all. So I think South Carolina were they 5-2 to get into the postseason, and then like 200-1 to win it all. So
5-2 to postseason with them would be very interesting. Someone knows something, or the committee is going to do something different, because I would take Miami at 8-1 way over. I would take South Carolina 5-2, and this is somebody who's biased. Clearly, I'm with South Carolina, but I've always looked at when I'm looking at a game and I'm yelling at one of my friends about something that happened. Why you had this? I said it's not. I want a fair playing field for everybody, and I want the games not to be intruded by the referee and all that. In this particular case, I just don't know that you could jump them over a 3-loss Alabama team when Alabama beat them on the field. But if you're going to go by the way they're playing, if they were playing on a neutral field now, you'd almost have to make South Carolina a favorite. So it's kind of like, I just don't know that South Carolina is going to make their way in. They needed an Auburn win. I thought if Georgia Tech had won that game Friday, I was glued to it, that I really thought that at that point they would have had a chance. But if you're going by way teams are playing, does Georgia get blown out by Texas? Are we thinking does even Georgia make it? So I go to this point, and again, I'm babbling here a little bit, but okay. I wonder when they eliminate these championship games, because you're going to start seeing they're not going to be worth it. Like, would a 2-loss Georgia team play a quarterback that's nicked up in this game just to win an SEC title? Or are they waiting for their game 2 weeks later? So you're going to have these where someone's going to get eliminated in these next upcoming years that played in the game that they probably weren't going to win and took their shot to be outside the 12. So,
yeah, much has changed, and probably will continue to evolve as this name, image, and likeness factor seems to be. I mean, you talk about changing the landscape of things. You do have more parity maybe at the top, but you're seeing the complete elimination of many programs from any form of contention. And if you're a head coach in these spots, we saw 2 of these positions in Florida just move on, as FAU hired a new head coach now after firing Tom Herman, which you would have thought was a pretty good pretty good figure to represent the program, and a good guy too. We got to know him a little bit. And then Mike McIntyre he turned the Colorado program around long before Dion got there, and they subsequently went into the tank after that. But he's at FIU, another impossible spot. Has 4-8 seasons, and whoever they bring in, you may as well just give them a blindfold and a last drag on a cigarette, because you're going to make money for a couple of years as a head coach. Maybe have a chance to get a leg up on putting your career back on track at a higher level, but it's not going to be for long, as Jerry Glanville said. All right, a big slate of action coming up, including Thursday night NFL. You got Lions-Packers. I don't know if you want to address that, but let's give the people – we've given them Miami 8-1 to make the playoff, which was a concept we stole from this Kazarian guy, but made some sense to us, so it'll probably go up in smoke. What are you looking at, Mike Jones, to make some money over the weekend here as we head towards the big stretch drive to holiday shopping and and all of the expense that you're going to incur. And is there anything better than making a big gambling score around the holidays? It's happened to me a couple
Nothing
of
like
times.
it.
I
Nothing
absolutely
like it. It's just we got to help tomorrow's newspaper has the right result in it. That's what we always look at.
yes.
Trying to find the winner. Um, let's go to. I'll start with the Packers on Thursday, and here's the reason why. I think Detroit is really banged up. You could start to see in the effects of blowing a big lead against Chicago, the backdoor we got against Chicago with the worst time management in history of
Yes.
football. I think I fired Thursday, which shocking to watch. I'm just sitting there going, how could he not call timeout immediately? Even an old guy like me who sits there and manages games by my money and by my eye test. I'm just shocked by how that happened, especially because if you look at the video, he's standing right next to the coach.
Oh,
So
that's crazy.
I'm standing right next to the ref. I'm sorry. The ref's right there next to him. He could just sit there and say timeout. But I just think Detroit's a little banged up here. I heard 15 guys are on the injury report. They signed Jamal Adams. Very interesting hire. They're doing everything they possibly can to shape up this defense for a playoff run. I know the division's on the line. They look like clearly the better team. Packers got a little revenge factor here. They were embarrassed at home. Beat them last year on Thanksgiving Day in Detroit. Kind of would take the 3.5 in this game and say the Packers kind of keep it close or maybe even win the game. Won't be surprised if the Packers do win.
All right. Starting with Green Bay on a Thursday night, we get an early jump on the weekend activity. What else
Mhm.
are you looking at, Michael?
I'm going to go to these college football championship games. I just watch Oregon and I'm so impressed. I look at all as a draftnik. I look at where Dylan Gabriel falls, and I just don't see why he's a fourth round pick. I know he's short. I know he hasn't all the metrics, but the guy's won everywhere he's been. Starting at UCF, going to Oklahoma, going now at Oregon. I was really, really impressed watching Oregon smash Washington around the field. They're fast, they're big, and I just think that they're better than Penn State overall. When I saw the line, and I think when I see these lines pop up, the first thing I think to myself is, wow, I would have made this 7.
Yes.
New field, the whole thing. And then I see 3.5. And then I got to think, do they know something or do I go with my instincts? Well, now we've had all the big, all the areas where we watched every game. I feel I'm better at the playoff stuff. And when you get down to the end, limited games, you can focus on one, you get to see more. I just like Oregon in this spot. Keep it undefeated, still wants to go win a title, send a precedent for the Pac 12 where they came from. I think this means something in this spot. Penn State getting a lucky chance to be in this game after a magical Michigan win over Ohio State. You know, I, I just look at Penn State's resume and I just don't know that they're as good as Oregon. And I think you might see it on the field. I like Oregon laying the 3.5.
Well, and you also have the Franklin factor in big games, which
Yeah.
you'd have to consider is probably worth at least 3.5 points in
Mhm.
and of itself. So
Yeah.
I like that selection. Oregon laying 3.5. I'm not impressed with Penn State.
No.
They've eked their way through here to this position where they got to the title game, and I think this is where they meet their match and probably meet them to the tune of less than a 3.5. They're not going to be within the 3.5 point margin. All right, you got one more for us, and I appreciate you
I
coming up.
do. I'm going to stay to that same day around a little at night again. SMU. One of the more fascinating things, and I could get into another show on this, is what the NIL's done and all the changing. So you get a team from the AAC that didn't play in a major Power Five conference that comes right in and wins the ACC. Is that an inflection of ACC being down? I don't know. Maybe SMU's that good. But I'm getting Clemson, a team that's battle tested in these spots as an underdog, getting 2.5. I get the spread. I understand it. Clemson played a really tough game, made mistakes in certain spots against South Carolina. I just think they ran into Superman and Sellers. I know SMU's got a quarterback that can do a lot of things moving around. Dabo in a big game. Give me the 2.5 in Clemson and say that maybe the cream of the ACC prior rises to the top of the spot. Game being played in Charlotte. I think Clemson's going to have a lot of fans there. I realize their shot. They get the gift to get in from Miami. I'm going to take my chances and say Clemson wins this game.
All right, so Clemson overcomes the point spread there, actually getting 2.5, and overcomes the oil money that SMU has found, the infusion of which has put them in a position to win the ACC in their very first year in the conference. All right, Mike, where can people find your picks? You have all kinds of innovative stuff going on when it comes to the gambling game, including ways to find winners.
Yeah, we're on Spotify at the Big Gunner podcast where we talk unfortunately Giants football, but we give you winners toward the end of the end of the pod. And picksforprofits.com, where we pick one game a day, and if our best bet loses, we refund your money. So we're doing things a little different there, but we're on the Big Gunner podcast and Spotify, giving out free picks winners throughout the week. That last week we were 3-2 and 2-1 in the colleges, so we're staying over 500.
Yes, and 2-1 here on the show. Only the
Yeah.
sorry ass can't play in the cold weather Dolphins
Yes.
proved to be our undoing on that. Mike, I can't thank you enough. We'll talk to you again next week in your usual spot on Thursday if Scotty M makes the recovery here. And late pinch hitter, man, coming through like a champ.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I called it. It's like
a line drive. It was great.
Middle relief. In middle relief, sometimes you need that guy to get you to the finish line. Maybe I'm that guy this time.
Manny fucking Moda, man. I pinch hit with you anytime. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks. You got it.
Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so he likes the Packers in the Thursday night game, getting 3.5. A Detroit team that keeps losing key components week in and week out seems to be, and they were certainly tested in this last ball game that they played, and so maybe they are coming back to the pack. And speaking of the pack, Packers hot, very impressive against the Dolphins on Thanksgiving Day. So the Packers getting 3.5. He likes Oregon to permanently shame Penn State right out of the title picture. Don't know that they are title material, but Oregon laying 3.5 doesn't seem like it's too prohibitive for Mike. And he likes taking the points with Clemson at Dabo Swinney against everybody's Cinderella ACC darling in SMU. So going to go ahead and take a shot there, getting 2.5 in that ball game for the ACC championship. All right, a lot of fun being with you. We did want to pay our respects to Lou Carnesecca, an iconic figure in the game of college basketball and in life as well. One of those guys that you absolutely couldn't help but like, especially growing up in New York at a time where St. John's was prominent. Early configurations of the Big East, Lou Carnesecca, revered by virtually everybody in the coaching community, the basketball community, the community in general. Made it to 99. He's one of those guys that you probably, if somebody bet you at a bar, hey, Lou Carnesecca, dead or alive, you probably would have been inclined to say dead, unfortunately. But it turns out we couldn't put him in his grave too early because that would have been my instinct. But he made it to 99 years old, so we wanted to pay tribute to now the late, great Lou Carnesecca. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Troy West going to join us from the West Coast, appropriately enough, as he makes his return to the program tomorrow. And we'll have a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys make some winning wagers tonight. And don't ever forget about the Jameis Winston factor, which is not only are there 50 ways to lose your money, but 50 different ways to get fucked. The worst of which, most despicable of which, is the late pick six that takes your team from covering the point spread and having a chance to win the game outright to buried right alongside what we hope is soon to be your bookmaker as well. All right, see you next time. I'm Jeff DeForrest for Greenlight Ventures, nofilter.net, and the people at Bet Online. We'll see you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.